The holidays are upon us, so what better time than now to take stock of the NBA season and look ahead with DraftKings contributor Garion Thorne, DraftKings contributor Nick Friar. Guys, we're almost halfway home. It's easier to see really who teams are right now, which one, in your eyes, has been the biggest surprise this season. We're talking good or bad here, Garion.
I think it kind of has to be the Cleveland Cavaliers. I just didn't see this version of this team coming. I mean, if you think about their offseason, we were all kind of expecting that Kevin Love was going to be moved. He was like visibly upset with being a Cavalier the past 2 seasons, and suddenly he's perfectly content to come in off the bench and be like a really great sixth man. They get like Lauri Markkanen and Ricky Rubio, former lottery picks that have never really found their place in the league, and suddenly they're producing in great spots for this team. They hit a really tough COVID run in the start of the season. They survive that. They lose Colin Sexton, and still they're hovering around the top of the Eastern Conference. And I guess this boils down to like, who has been your most surprising player? And while we should never be surprised that someone taken that high in the draft is that good, Evan Mobley is a stud, man. It is so crazy how good he is and how impactful he is defensively. I think rule of thumb when it comes to the NBA, we always figure as good as a defensive prospect as someone is, he's not going to have a real defensive impact in the NBA till maybe his second or his third season. The Cavaliers are only allowing 100.6 points per 100 possessions when Mobley is on the court. They are basically the best defensive team in the league when Mobley is on the floor. That's how crazy this guy has been so far. So I just think it's the Cavaliers.
Yeah, they've been nowhere near a contender since James left a few summers ago. What do you have here, Nick?
I think Garion's absolutely spot on with the Cavaliers. I mean, they've proven that size still matters in the NBA, despite the trends that we've seen over the past few years. But the other teams that I can't help but notice, too, I mean, the Bulls, obviously, as much as I like DeMar DeRozan and I like Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball is, a good player and everything, I did not expect them to do what they've been doing this season. So I can't help but look to them as one of the surprise teams too. But next to the Cavaliers, I would say number 2 has to be the Memphis Grizzlies. You start off the season slow, you lose Ja Morant, and then somehow they're 4th in the Western Conference standings. And with them, just like the Cavaliers, they've been cover machines this season too. Cavaliers more so than the Grizzlies, but still both very reliable in that regard. So as much as I don't think the Grizzlies I don't think Gary would say the Cavaliers necessarily are NBA like finals contenders either. To see these two teams as competitive, strong teams in their respective conferences too, and Memphis is in the friggin' West, as good as the Cavs, as the East has gotten, the Western Conference is still a little bit better. So to see Memphis do this without Ja Morant for the majority of the season has been mind-blowing to me.
And then, Nick, you do have the usual cast of characters who are in the mix for league MVP. So Giannis, Curry, Durant, all with a solid case here. At this point of the season, who's the favorite?
I got to go with Steph Curry in this one because as much as when it comes down to MVP stuff, as much as we're still looking at who's the best player, usually on the best team in some capacity too, there's also a level of narrative too that you got to factor in when you're talking about the voting, right? And with a guy like Steph, of course, a fan favorite, and reporters seem to like him too as well, the media that covers him. So that's not going to hurt him necessarily either, where it could maybe some other guys. With Steph Curry, like he's got the record-breaking season, and then he's pulled the Warriors out of, I don't want to say the basement, but I mean, they went and they were the cream of the crop, and then they went all the way down to the bottom in the Western Conference where they're not a playoff contender. And now they still don't have, a finals contender. They still don't have Klay Thompson. And as much as they're expected to get him back and everything, I don't know what he's going to be when he comes back. He may just be a sharpshooter, and right now that's all they need. But still, he's been the guy, like he always has been in Golden State. And they're one of the best teams in the league, if not the absolute best. So I think that you have to give it to Steph right now as the midseason MVP and the favorite going forward.
Yeah, Gary, and the narrative has started to form that this is a 3-man race.
Which is interesting because if you ask me who should win the MVP, I would probably say Nikola Jokic.
Wow,
who has
okay.
been the best player by every single advanced metric. This is a guy who is single-handedly keeping the Nuggets afloat. They have lost Michael Porter Jr. They have not yet got back Jamal Murray, and he is doing everything within his power and having a better statistical season than he had last year when he was the MVP. So I think Jokic should actually win, but who do I think will win? It's Steph Curry. This is Steph Curry's year. And Nick was saying it. It's narrative-based. And I'm not saying Steph doesn't deserve to win MVP. He does. He's been amazing. But this is the three-point record. This is having maybe the best record in the NBA by the time this thing is all said and done. This is the narrative surrounding the Warriors and their up and down life as a franchise the last couple of years. And these things also come in waves. Like, look at LeBron. Sometimes you go 4 or 5 years without winning an MVP. It's been since 2016 since Curry won an MVP. I almost think writers are just going to think like, oh, it's time. He's due. He's due for one of these. We got to give him an MVP. So voter fatigue factored in with Jokic. I think Steph is probably going to win this thing.
Well, talking big picture now in each conference, guys, starting in the West, where the Warriors' resurgence, you just mentioned it, Nick, has them looking like one of the top-tier contenders in the league once again. And, Nick, you also just mentioned it. They'll get Klay Thompson back after the new year. Golden State, they the team to beat, Nick?
Yeah, I absolutely got to go with them at this point. Look, I know that the Suns, if you go over to DraftKings Sportsbook, the Suns are the number 2 team out of the Western Conference, and then it goes the Lakers, Jazz, and then the Clippers. But I think that the Warriors right now are head and shoulders above everybody because you look at defensive efficiency. We're talking all about Steph and his scoring, and you're going to get Klay Thompson back, and I will talk about him more in a second. But on defense, they are the most efficient team on the defensive end. And then you have Steph Curry on top of that, one of the best scorers, the best long-range shooter in the game when that's the most important talent to have on the offensive end. I don't know how you can't say that. And then the wins, they support that they've been one of the best teams in the league, if not the best. I don't know how you can't look at them as the team to beat, again, in the superior conference as well. When it comes to Klay Thompson, we don't know what to expect, but right now I'm looking at Klay Thompson returning at minimum as an elite sharpshooter, one of the best shooters in the league still. I don't know that you're going to get what he brings in the defensive end normally because of everything that he's gone through. Not a knock on him. I hope we get that back for his sake at some point. But right now, even if you just get him at the elite level of sharpshooting that he was at before or close to it, that is a huge addition to this team that is already a strong offensive team and even better on the defensive end.
All right, Garion, is it the Warriors? Could it be the Jazz? Could it be the Suns?
I mean, it could be, but I think it's the Warriors. And building off what Nick was talking about, I almost look at the Warriors right now like they're Scrooge McDuck, and they've also got 5 lotto tickets just in their hand, possibly making them even richer because we don't know what this team or what the final form of this team could possibly look like, and they're already arguably the best team in basketball. I mean, what is Klay Thompson going to be when he comes back? Is he just a sharpshooter? Can he return to like all NBA level defense? Because that's the kind of player he was prior to this injury. And then you've just got this mismatch of lotto picks from the last couple years that either A, maybe like James Wiseman is an impactful player when he comes back. Jonathan Kuminga's looked kind of good when given an opportunity to play so far this season. Moses Moody has been a little up and down. So could those guys be rotation players moving forward after they get a little seasoning during the regular season and moving into the playoffs? Or could you just move those guys for another impactful star? There's so many different ways this season can still develop for the Warriors. And like I said, they're already building off a platform of essentially being the best team in basketball. So I think you have to say that they're the team to beat right now.
All right, as for the East, you have the Nets. When healthy, they look pretty unbeatable, guys. However, Milwaukee is always in the mix with the Greek Freak. We got some solid teams lurking. You've mentioned the Bulls. The Heat are in there as well. Who's the team to fear here? Who's the team coming out of the East, Garion?
I still think it's the Bucks. And look, the Nets are worrisome. When they're at full strength, what is full strength with them? Are we going to get Kyrie Irving only playing road games in the playoffs? We don't really know the answer to that question yet. I guess right now it's yes. So maybe home court advantage becomes not as important for the Nets in the playoffs. It's kind of weird that way. But I think you said the Nets are scary when they're at full strength. So are the Bucks. I mean, the Bucks really haven't had all that much opportunity this season to just line up Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Middleton, and Drew Holiday and say, hey, this is our best lineup. They haven't had Brook Lopez. He's been dealing with a back injury. They say he'll be back in time to maybe play a little bit of regular season basketball, get in touch with the playoffs. Dante DiVincenzo almost came back and then was immediately put in health and safety protocols. So this is a team still developing, but they're outscoring opponents by almost 16 points per 100 possessions when their 3 best players are on the court. And I still just think Giannis went to another level in the playoffs last season. And if he can be that guy again when it matters most, I just don't know how many guys can beat him.
But Nick, Durant, Harden, Kyrie, when they all return and they're on the court together, it'll be the first time since the opening moments of Game 1 of last season's Eastern Conference semifinals.
Yeah, this is a tough one to call. I think the West is a lot more definitive, as much as that is the better conference. Still, I think the Eastern Conference has gotten a lot better, but everybody's kind of on even playing field unless the Nets figure it out. I still think the Bucks do have an advantage, and I'm with Garion because now the Bucks have the experience of winning it all. They have an idea of what it takes. Doesn't matter who they had to beat to get there in the final. Doesn't matter that the Nets only had Kevin Durant by the end of their matchup in the postseason last year. That said, if the Nets do figure it out, if the Nets are even just healthy and they have two of their guys on the floor against the Bucks in the postseason, that is going to be a tough series to figure out who's going to go and win that one. So I wouldn't say it's definitive right now. I do give the Bucks a slight edge because with Kyrie coming back, look, we've seen it enough with Kyrie. He comes into a place and things don't usually look the same after he leaves. And as much as he's been on with this team for a little while now, this team has had to figure out how to survive without him. So I would imagine some changes are going to be made that now that he's coming back. Never mind the fact that he's only going to be able to play in so many of the games, all of them not being at home. So it's an odd situation still. So where in the past I've been ready it's KD and Kyrie. Yeah, you can give them the title for sure. Even with the Eastern Conference, I don't feel as comfortable because their dynamic is going to be odd. But even if it's just James Harden and Kevin Durant and they're healthy, that's still they can go toe to toe with the Bucks. It's not going to matter. So I give the Bucks the advantage, but the Nets are nipping right at their heels.
Okay, before you guys take off, let's look even further down the line. And given how things have shaken out to start the year, who was a potential dark horse team you could see winning it all, Garion?
So I don't know if these guys count as a dark horse because I would have considered them favorites in the East or among the favorites in the East coming into the season. But considering where they sit in the standings right now, they're a play-in team. So the Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, this is just a team that has the potential to be great. And sort of like I was talking about with the Warriors, one thing you have to kind of do with the NBA midseason point, especially until you hit that trade deadline, is think about what these teams could be at that point in the season. And there is no bigger question mark. There's no bigger if in the NBA than Ben Simmons right now. Can Ben Simmons come back and play for the 76ers? I guess that's a possibility. But what will Ben Simmons turn into? What asset is going to come back to Philadelphia that they can actually use on the court? I know, what a concept to have someone who plays basketball. So what will this team look like? I just think they have the highest ceiling of all of the teams that right now aren't in the thick of the playoff picture in either the East or the West Conference.
Okay, Nick, dark horse.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to get an Atlanta Braves situation like we got last year. I mean, it's just not how the NBA works. But that said, we had the Heat a few years back make it in the bubble. And then, of course, you have the Suns this past year. As much as they've been, great in everything, don't get me wrong, they were still a surprise. And then the Bucks making it too. I mean, not as much of a surprise, but we all thought the Nets were going to get it. But then injuries come into play. And now in the era of COVID too, you have that to factor in where you could lose a guy for a game and then that can change everything. So under that, possibility happening, the Jazz, I know they're not a dark horse team because they're still high up in the standings, but I look at them as a team normally I would say no, it's going to be the Warriors. In years past I would say the Lakers, and then over in the Eastern Conference it's the Bucks and the Nets right now. I wouldn't really take the Jazz seriously, but considering injuries and considering how well the Jazz have done, when you look at their efficiency, they're the most offensive efficient team in the league, and they're sixth in defensive efficiency. And they've had different guys step up through the course of the season, like Gobert earlier in the year, and then he kind of took a step back, and other guys have stepped forward. So not really a great dark horse team, but this is the NBA. You're not going to have that kind of thing happen where you did with Major League Baseball. It's just not how the league typically works. But those teams that are good, but you wouldn't think they're contending for the finals, have been sneaking their way in the past few years, and the Jazz are a team that could do that.
Yeah, Garion goes with the team that finished with the best record in the Eastern Conference last season. You go with the team that finished with the best record in the Western Conference last season, and also the Jazz, one of the most well-rounded teams in the NBA. Garion, Nick, good stuff. Thanks for the help, guys.